Association of Kenya. Then we also have our Planet Wizard, whose director is here, Mr. Hezron, and Reculture, which is the organization that I work for. And today, in this the short amount of time we have today together here, and in the days to come, because this series is going to be happening every fortnight, we are going to talk about main issues. We are going to talk about issues that we are facing as men, and our goal is to make an impact in the following ways. We want to stimulate very productive conversations around the issues that are affecting men today, because boy child right now, they say, is facing a lot of challenges when it comes to taking on the world as a man. The several challenges, be it socially, be it financially. So, and it's bringing a lot of issues in the society. So we want to stimulate very productive conversations around this area, so that we are able to nurture resilient guys, resilient people who are able to be the men we want in the society, to give them the strength to take on manliness, because manliness is a big responsibilities. It's a big responsibility. So we hope that by having these conversations, and with mentors, inviting mentors, guys like Newton here, we hope that by hosting you guys, having these conversations with you, we'll be able to create confidence in young men where there was once confusion and or uncertainty. Then we also aim to unlock the potential within us as young men. That we unlock that potential that we have within us, so that we are able to be the men that the society desires. So, having said that, I would like to introduce Newton. Newton has several accolades and titles to his name, and what we know currently is the CEO of Phillips Pharmaceuticals, and that is an international pharma company. Yeah, and I know it's quite amazing to be where you are, and we'll just like to hear from you how your journey has been. How has it been for you, and what you've gone through to be where you are, and those principles that have guided you along, the challenges you faced, how you've handled them, and how has life been for you in general. So, and I know when we hear your story, I know we'll pick one or two motivational points from that will encourage us to be men like you and even better. So, karibu, Newton.
Thanks, Michael. And again, please do let me know that my sound is okay. I think I'll try probably just to, as you've put it, maybe start by introducing myself, and then my understanding also is that we're really going to have an open chat, which is extremely important, especially for the participants that we have today. I do want to say that we have a structured line of conversation, but I think as men, it's important to bring out those issues that often we don't have clarity, or we would like to really be able to address. And I think it's about experience here. So as you put it, Michael, I'm not so sure about the accolades, but my name is Newton Siele. Very simple guy. My life is, I feel like it's got a sort of straight line, because I graduated in 1999 from the Kenya Medical Training College. I'm not sure at what point in time I decided I wanted to do pharmacy, but anyway, I ended up doing pharmacy, and I enjoyed the School of Pharmacy. So when I graduated, I had a choice, like I think most of my colleagues, to get into dispensing like everybody else. And I did try, I must say, for 2 months. But every time I was trying to dispense, my boss would come and find me outside talking. And, I think then I realized that actually I enjoyed more engaging with people than sitting at the counter and dispensing. So I finished in July, and I think by September already, I went for my first interview. It's sort of interesting that I did this interview with a company known as Lord's Healthcare in 1999. It was my first interview as a medical rep. But I think one thing that I look back to, which I think for me has been a very important guiding principle, is that I was passionate about what I wanted to do. So it was my first interview and I got that job. And that's really how I got myself into the world of med repping. No background, no experience, just passionate. And I was lucky that, of course, I came in with the pharmacy knowledge behind me. And from 1999 to date, so actually today, Michael, it is about 21 years, because it was August, remember, when I started my job as a medical rep. So I just realized the other day that it's been quite a while. But I've been fortunate to have seen the evolution of the pharma industry. And so started as a medical rep, Lowe's Healthcare. I was actually there for about 4 years. There's a small story in between, because I did leave the company to join a different company, but it didn't work out. And I think we'll talk about those kind of career decisions that people make. And sometimes they feel like it was really a disaster. Sometimes mistakes that you make in itself can be a springboard that can help you to grow back. So I sort of went back again to Lord's, and I ended up spending about 4 years in Lord's Healthcare. So rose to become a sales manager, and then I left to join another pharma company known as Europa Healthcare. And so it's within that particular time, I think it was in 2005, when I was approached by one of the multinationals. And so I joined my first multinational company, which was AstraZeneca, in 2005, I believe. And I was responsible for doing oncology and respiratory. So again, for me, one of the things that was really very interesting is that I enjoyed doing my job. And every time I realized that when passion came in first, everything else wasn't as difficult. So I think actually I didn't do it even 2 years before a different multinational approached me again. That was Roche. They wanted me to join their team, and oncology, which was at that time really growing. And so in 2006, I actually, so I left in 2004, Europa. I joined AstraZeneca. I was there for about a year and a half or 2 years thereabout. And then I left to join Roche as a medical rep, starting with the oncology portfolio. I was the only one doing oncology, actually. And 2 years later, I was promoted to a junior product manager, responsible for covering East Africa. And at that time also, I was given the responsibility to support the other countries in West Africa. And so I think that was my first real role that really exposed me to the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa. I worked with a number of my senior colleagues. I had very good mentors. And so I sort of evolved in that role into a product manager. And by 2009, I believe, we also then had a new responsibility, which was actually shifted to what we were calling it a franchise head, which is almost like in our business cycles, we call it like a small general manager. So that was in 2009, 10, thereabout. Ended up becoming the marketing manager for oncology for East Africa. And then my boss at that particular time left the company. So I took an acting role as the country head for Roche. And then in 2012, I was then approached by Novartis as the regional access manager for the access. So at that time, I think I was looking at what are the areas that I've not grown in terms of career. And I decided that, you know what, I didn't have as much experience when it comes to access programs. Ended up joining Novartis in 2012, worked within the access program, which was principally driving Coatem, their malaria business. It was at that time their biggest business, and I think the biggest actually globally, because of course malaria was quite a big problem. They were doing more than 100 million doses globally annually, and it's an African problem. So we worked also very closely with a number of my colleagues who are responsible for the other countries, especially West Africa and Southern Africa, right? So, and then in 2014, there was a very interesting conversation I had with my boss, because I said, you know what, malaria has been doing very well. It's really been controlled. When I started doing malaria, we were losing a child every 6 seconds. I think 2 years later, we had managed to bring access to a very common product that most of us know as AL. And that that loss that we were having, which was previously almost every 6 seconds, had moved to 30 seconds to 60 seconds. So which was really a tremendous improvement in terms of access. As opposed to losing about 4 kids a minute, we were now at least about to, getting to 1, which was, again, a very big part of the program, especially the joint effort. And so I felt that I'd sort of accomplished my role. There wasn't anything more exciting that I was going to do. So at that time, Novartis asked me to go back and do oncology again, because that's what I'd done when I was in my previous company. So I sort of asked myself, okay, I'd done oncology for 8 years. I left because I had really been able to grow, and I felt like I didn't have anything new that was exciting when it comes to oncology. And for that matter, I think for me, when I got an opportunity to then go into diabetes, something I'd not done before, I moved into Novo Nordisk as a country head. And I was then given the responsibility to manage the East African business, countries that I'd also not been before, like Sudan, Ethiopia. It was quite a very good, I think, a very good project. And for me, a very good learning process. Ended up also doing countries in Southern Africa, way below up to countries like Angola, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia. And again, it really was very rich in terms of allowing me to interact with other pharma markets across the sub-Saharan Africa, until, of course, towards the end of 2015, when for personal reasons, I realized that I needed to focus on my family. So I also had to make a very tough decision in terms of weighing whether the responsibility and the amount of time I was spending outside was really worth. So I then decided it was time to really come back. Got a very interesting offer from AstraZeneca. I remember I'd worked as a medical rep. They wanted me to take the country head position, but it was going to get me at least to be based in the country and to also allow me to spend more time with my family and my young kids. And I think that's really towards now, having worked in AstraZeneca. I was there very briefly before I got the offer to join Phillips in 2016, actually, which then also allowed me to really expand my role as a CEO. Phillips is a well-established pharma company. It's been around for about 30 years. I'd worked with them actually from the time I was responsible for Novo Nordisk. So over the last 4 years, actually, I'm almost completing my 4th year in a couple of months. That has been my role. And I see myself now where I'm more able to mentor and grow younger people that are getting to the industry, not just within pharma, but of course, the other spheres or spikes that are related in terms of career. And that's where I am actually, Michael, as it is, right? So for the last 4 years, I have been the CEO for Phillips Pharmaceuticals. I'm responsible for the pharma division. And as I said, we've really been around for a long time, more than 30 years actually, as Phillips Pharmaceuticals. And we probably are in every sphere, if you think about it. We also do have medical devices, and I have a colleague of mine that heads that particular aspect of the business. That's Newton from a career perspective. Married with 1 wife and with 2 boys. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Newton, for taking us through your career life. And it's quite amazing how you've been through all these pharma industries, and they're almost all the industries. When we're talking about big pharma, you've actually gone through all of them, and that is quite amazing. So, let's start from career-wise, and as young people, what would you advise us as people who are still in school and those who are new in the job market? What are some of those basic things that we need to have in terms of personality, in terms of skills, so that we are able to really take on these career paths?
Thanks, Michael. I probably also want to use, as much as I can remember, real life examples to be able to answer that question. I think one of the things that I realized growing up as a young man is how sometimes we are afraid of making mistakes. And that sometimes is something that we grow up. Remember, most people, as we talk about growth mindset and fixed mindset, we tend to be pushed at the early stages of our life to focus on not making mistakes. And even our education system tends to focus on that. So I think I would say the first thing is, and I guess maybe not just as a young man for that matter, but really anybody would want to avoid being afraid of making mistakes. Have I made career mistakes? Certainly. And I remember at one time in 2000, like I was telling you, Michael, in 2000 and I think it was in 2001. You know, when you're young and when you're starting your job, always the thing that you're thinking is that I need the next job that will give me a lot of money. And often when you start, let's say the first offer that you get, you know, you will not have much of a choice. So if somebody comes and approaches you and says, okay, you know what, I can pay you double. I think sometimes we tend to be rational, and it's very understandable. In fact, I remember that I asked myself, now if I get more money, I can buy a bigger hi-fi. You know, at that time, Michael, that was the main thing that we were looking at, right? And for young men, you're thinking, I can upgrade, you know, I can have a better car, I can have this kind of things. And for a short time, that seemed to be the case. But I remember, unfortunately, when I did the career move, the place that I moved to actually ended up not being what it was supposed to be, right? So 6 months down the line, we actually were facing an imminent redundancy. In fact, I was the last person in that company to leave. And I remember one of my very good friends, you know, decided at that time that this life is too difficult. In fact, me, I want to go home, up country. I think I can do better. And I told him, look, sometimes we have to learn from the mistakes that we make. And for a short period of time, being in Nairobi is not easy. And even at that time, Michael, it's the same thing. You have bills, you have rent, you know, you have food, you know, you don't have people that you're relying on. So when you don't have a job, you're wondering, what am I going to do next? And at that time, I remember one of my former colleagues told me, by the way, there's a vacancy at Standard and Chartered Bank. Would you be interested to try? Remember, I did pharmacy, Michael, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't have a choice, you know? And I realized that if I was not going to be flexible, I might end up finding myself like my friend saying, you know what, I'll go home. So I actually went for the interview with Standard and Chartered Bank. And I know I didn't talk about it, but it was a very brief phase of my life that I worked in consumer banking. Of course, I went there with the hope that I could focus on the healthcare finance. But again, it was, I think, the first time they'd ever seen somebody who done pharmacy in an interview. We were in a, you know, we had about 300 applicants and I ended up getting the job. But it allowed me to still stay around, and I was still able to go back to my former employer, which was Lord's Healthcare, and still get my job. The point I'm trying to put across is that I think sometimes we find ourselves very rigid, and that rigidity in itself can actually cost you in terms of making career mistakes. There's nothing wrong with, you know, falling down, as we put it, but we now teach people that learn to fall forward, or we call it failing forward, right? How can you use the mistakes that you have made as a springboard to make a better career choice?
Okay. Wow. Two major points there. We should not fear mistakes. We should and especially make them when we are young, and we should learn to fall forward. So that is quite clear. Then also you talked about flexibility, that we should not be rigid. Now, to my next question. Currently, there's a lot of let's say job scarcity. Okay, there are no jobs, so to say. But somebody told me never to say that. But let's say it's reality, and we are currently facing a job scarcity in several fields. So in this situation, what we should we do? What should we do so that we stay ahead? We are able to nab those opportunities that are available.
So, Michael, that's a very good question. And I'm hoping maybe in another forum we can just discuss about this aspect about jobs and maybe the perspective that has changed. One of the things I tell people is that whereas job hunters have still maintained the kind of mindset that we've had, you know, for as long as people can remember, employers have changed. And maybe that's where the mismatch is. I don't know whether the word would be that the scarcity of jobs. I totally agree with whoever told you we shouldn't say that, because I think what has changed is that a lot of people still approach job hunting the way we used to. You know, if you remember when you used to graduate, you print CVs, you have this brown envelope, you send it out to as many places. I don't think that is the correct approach as it is now. Now, of course, I'm saying that cognizant of the fact that with the current COVID-19 scenario, there's a whole different discussion about redundancy and certain jobs that are unlikely to remain the same. So I think that's, as I said, is a different discussion. Yes, there are certain jobs that are going to probably not survive post COVID-19. There are certain jobs that will shrink as a result of this radical or disruption that we have in the market. But even then, it takes me back to what I was saying earlier, Michael. It's also with regards to flexibility. Do you define the job that you're looking for based on the fact that this is my career? I train as a pharmacist, or I train as a biochemist, or I train as the molecular biologist. So for me, the definition of a job is that I need to do something that is in line with what I trained. Or are you looking at your kind of skill set and what it is that you can be able to offer a prospective employer? So that's the discussion that people don't often look at. When somebody sits in front of me today and I am interviewing them, to be very honest, I'm not so sure whether I look at the background to say, did this person do biochemistry or zoology? Is that what their expertise in? It's rather, what do you bring on the table? What is the kind of skill set that would be attractive for me? And people still find it hard to be able to define that. And number two, when you talk about flexibility, of course, is knowing, and I think with now COVID-19, yes, what you may be good in may not be what is available. What's the next best thing that you can adapt to? What is it that you can be able to? And I'll just use a very simple example, Manuel. Let's talk about digital communication. I think the reason why Google, for example, today is the most profitable company, or Amazon, the reason why these companies are doing so well is because they were able to adapt. Not even before COVID, but they saw opportunities that many people had not seen. There are a lot of things that we can often be able to do. We just don't open our minds to see those opportunities.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think we've taken notes, guys, and Newton has said we need to have certain skill sets that we're able to differentiate us, not just what we went to school and learned. And another question, Newton, if let's say I get into a new job today, and this job, the reason I got it were my qualifications, my papers from school. Now, to be able to rise through the career ranks, through the ranks in this organization that I have joined, what are some of the things that I should have in terms of personality that will be able to push me up the ladder?
Yeah, that's a good question, Michael. I think for me, three things come to mind. Number one, of course, is passion, because regardless of what you do, if you are not passionate, you are unlikely to deliver on that, whatever responsibility, goals, objectives, or tasks that you have been given. You really have to be passionate about it. And often, I think, as I said earlier, it's that passion that will make you want to work regardless, for example, of the remuneration or the timelines that you have. But also, secondly, I think is, if you're asked to deliver on something, nowadays people also measure how innovative are you. So are you just doing exactly what you've been asked? Do you, sort of go outside and deliver even more than what you've been asked? Because for an employer, that's more attractive. The fact that you can actually be able to see opportunities that I didn't even think about it, and you're able to identify and probably come up with suggestions of how to go for them, that makes a prospective employee attractive. And at that particular time, if you're looking at talent and recognition, it becomes easier for the individual, of course, to be recognized. And please tie those 2 points with the fact that you want to have somebody that has a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. Growth mindset means that I might not be there, but I know I can get there. Growth mindset doesn't limit somebody because of what you perceive as an expertise that they have. It's the fact that they are flexible enough to learn and become better. And that is important.
Show all right there. And then it's going to pop up all these different pairs.
So yeah, that is extremely important. The other thing that I think people tend to forget is integrity. Michael, I think nowadays I see employers that will not even touch anybody with a 6-foot pole if there's any doubt about their integrity. In the end, you want somebody who you can be able to trust with the responsibility they are given and that they are going to be able to deliver. Of course, I think that's a common challenge that we see with the generation that we have. There's that doubt that are they really able to have that integrity with them? And if you don't have it, as I said, some employers, I think I was talking to somebody today and he was telling me that, in fact, for them, and this is one of our partners, for them, even when they suspect, forget about even where you have a clear case of somebody not just demonstrating integrity, just the fact that it's suspected, for example, they don't even touch that person. And when people forget that nowadays, unlike before, there's so much information that's out there about you. People just need to click on your social media page, go to your Facebook page, go to your Twitter, go to your Instagram, and they get so much about you. What do those social media pages, what do those social media pages say about you as a person? And that's what employers also look at.
Okay, thank you. You were just talking on about integrity, and I also had a question on that, because currently, let's say, as the world is compromising on integrity, we may afford you some luxuries in the world. Okay, some extra cash in your pocket. Now, when you are faced in such a situation in your workplace, or generally in several dealings you are in, how do you ensure that you stand your ground in such a situation?
So I think for me, fortunately, Michael, also, we work in such a highly regulated field that often your survival is based on how above board you are. And I think that is really important. Can I relate that to a personal life? Yes, because, in a country like ours, we don't really have a lot of true stories of people that you can say not only put integrity and honesty above everything else, but that their success is based on what they have done, rather than, of course, maybe they were able to get a tender here, or able to set up a briefcase company and make this huge amount of money. So yes, I do agree. In fact, when we were discussing with David, that maybe we lack as many role models of people that have really been able to grow and succeed based on a very high level of integrity. But for me, I want to use the example of where I work, Phillips Pharmaceuticals. And this is a local company. Michael, started in 1991 by my boss and the family. And today, as we speak, Phillips Pharmaceuticals is present in about 7 markets in Africa. In Nigeria, for example, which is not an easy place to be able to set up a business. We are in Southern Africa, in Zambia, we are in Eastern Africa, including Rwanda, Tanzania, and those markets, they are independent Philips companies that have been set up. One of the main reasons that we have actually grown and set up in those places was because of the integrity and the high level of transparency that the company has operated on for the last 30 years. And I see that as being one of the most motivating things, Michael, And yes, I've also on the flip side seen people that try to make shortcuts, either in their business or in their personal life, but that doesn't really last long. Or even if you actually did get that money that you were trying to make, through a deal, it doesn't make you happy. The only thing that we see, especially in our countries, where maybe these kind of people end up using that money to get into politics, because when they're in politics, of course, it's easy to protect this, especially, let me not call it loot, but especially the, for lack of a better word, money that might not have been earned through a genuine means or mechanism. So yes, it's a difficult sell, especially to young people, to tell them that, by the way, transparency does actually stand the ground. But I can tell you that, Michael, and for me, this is my 21st year. I've seen people who, through diligence and hard work, have really been able to grow. Nothing short of that. But then that becomes something that you can also be proud of. And yes, I do think it is possible.
Thank you for that. Another thing, in the current job market, and what we are currently facing is that there's now call for advocating for the boy child space. Guys are now advocating for the boy child to be given space. Now, do you think in the current job market, affirmative action does it roll out against men, and how is that affecting us, or how is the current situation?
That's an interesting question, and I'm hoping that also our participants today will be able to engage on that. I do agree, Michael. I think if you look at a lot of the policies that are in place at the moment, yes, we spend quite a bit of time in trying to provide clarity or affirmative action, especially for the female gender. And I think in doing that with a lot of success, it ended up also sidelining, especially the boy child, as you've put it. And so there is definitely a gap. And, this is something that if we don't do anything about it, in the next years to come will be a big challenge, because the next generation will also depend on having both the female and the male gender really sort of not necessarily having disparity, but the affirmative action being addressed for both, the male and the male and the female gender. So I do agree, Michael. I don't think at the moment that we've really had as much focus on affirmative action when it comes to the boy child as we've had on the girl child. And of course, I think there have been very valid reasons, because historically, and there are two aspects of it. There's the first world or developed countries, and our third world or developing countries, where more often than not, the girls ended up not progressing from an educational perspective, maybe getting married off early. So it was almost predestined in terms of what their life would end up being. And I think we've addressed that. We've seen a very good number of successful, both academically, politically, business-wise, in terms of the girl child. And yes, maybe this time also to make sure that we're not necessarily dropping the ball when it comes to the boy child.
Wow. I think that is a conversation that we need to have more and more, and see how we can go around it. And I think in this series we'll take it up in other talks. So because we've talked about the challenges that we face in the job market, and we've touched on affirmative action, I want us to move away from career, and now let's come back to the normal life of a young man. What society expects of you as a man. And we face a lot of challenges, and as men we are expected to be providers by default, and this is putting a lot of pressure on us. So now, as a man, what can you tell us on these normal life pressures that we have as men to create our space and to give the impact that we expected to have as men? What's your take on that?
That's also a very interesting question, Michael. Let me put it in my perspective, and then, of course, as I said again, the audience really, they are also free to be able to comment. I think number one is we need to be very clear as men who is going to be our role model. What I see, and I don't blame our young people, is that it's very easy for them to be swayed if you're looking at the so-called celebrities, because as you've seen, Michael, it's very easy for people to present a different perspective about their life on social media. If you're relying on what you're seeing on Instagram, on Facebook, or YouTube, it's very easy to have a wrong focus in terms of a role model. So I think the choice of a role model is extremely important. I've also seen that there's a correlation between there's something that we normally teach, which is called 7 habits of highly effective people. And there are two aspects of the 7 habits. There's the aspect about your own personal life, and there's the aspect about your relationship with the public, what we call the interdependence. Uh, People that tend to be very clear in terms of what they want in in life, people that have a, they have a focus, they are proactive, as we normally put it, like in the first habit. People that begin with the end in mind, meaning they know exactly where they want to go, they are more likely to be successful. And yet the opposite is very true. When you don't really have a clear goal, when you have a fixed mindset, when you're not, for lack of a better word, having the kind of person that you would say is my mentor based on what I can be able to see, you're more likely to sort of drift, if I may use that word, Michael. So I think as a young man today, my biggest concern is on that. Who really is your mentor? And on what basis is that person a mentor? Is it something you have seen? Is it something that is tangible? Is it based on what you've seen on Facebook or what you've seen in terms of their posts? Typically, if we were to use the word following, who truthfully are you following really? And why are you that person's follower? What value are they adding to your life that makes you want to be able to follow that person? That I think is a very important question. We rarely have that kind of a discussion. Um, as men also, Michael, maybe one of the things that we've not been truthful is understanding ourselves. Because one of the things about that 7 habits, it says, yes, seek to understand before being understood, right? You have to know yourself, and that is extremely important. If you're going to also reach out to other people, to the society, how well do you know yourself? Do you know your pitfalls? Do you know your blind spots? Do you ask for 360 degrees feedback from your own colleagues? Do you get to know how other people perceive you? Not necessarily because you want to use that as being a judgment of you, but just to understand your personality. That also helps you to know who you are as a person and areas maybe that you need to work on, for example. So those are things that I think we don't have that discussion as men. And when it comes to relationships, I think you can only be as good in a relationship as you are as an individual. So what you bring on the table or what you are able to deposit is going to be as good depending on what you have first yourself in your account. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I hope it does to everybody. So another thing, let's talk about family and work-life balance, because men have always been accused that we focus too much on our work, on bringing food to the table, and put the family aside. Or what we don't focus more on what our spouses require, what our kids require. What's your take on that?
Actually, I was going to say my favorite quote, Michael, and I'm going to write it also on the chat box, is one from Dr. Steve Covey. He says that things which matter the most must never be at the mercy of things which matter the least. So I'll repeat it. Things which matter the most must never be at the mercy of things which matter the least. And it takes me back to one particular habit that we were taught about on those 7 habits. It's called fastings fast. In life, all of us have 4 boxes. Everybody, we have 4 boxes that we deal on. Actually, what I'll do, Michael, as we continue, allow me to share that one particular slide. I'll do that so we can come to
Oh,
that question. I think that's more better, isn't it?
yes, yes.
Let me do that. Hopefully I can be able to, yeah. Please enable, have you enabled me to share the screen?
Okay, let me check.
Done.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Um, Life has 4 boxes, okay, and everything in terms of what we do is driven by 2 things. It's either important or urgent. The first box you see there, which I'm calling the box of necessity, we normally say this is a box of things that are extremely important, extremely urgent. Like, for example, Michael, today, if you have symptoms where you have flu, you're coughing, you have fever, and you're feeling body aches, you need to rush to a hospital, isn't it? We call that a necessity. It's a crisis. Also today, if you got a message, for example, from the electricity company saying that, by the way, your tokens, I don't know, or let me put it this way, if you're on a prepaid meter and you start hearing that ringtone, then you know you have a couple of minutes before your electricity goes off. So you need to pay so that you can get power. The other thing is often, and for those of us who've been in health, when you start feeling unwell, or you feel like you have, for example, I don't know, a lump, you decide that, hey, I need to go and see a doctor urgently. We call it a box of importance and urgency. That's why it's called a box of necessity. There are things that cannot just wait. You have to address them there and then. Now, the thing is that the second box, which we call the box of discipline, is a box of things that are not urgent but important. A very good example of this is, for example, is relationships, is investment. For example, it's about getting in touch with people, building or growing your career, learning something new, a new skill. Nobody puts a gun on your head on this kind of things. Nobody will put a gun on your head to say you have to build your relationship with your peers, with your parents. Yet it's extremely important. The third box that you're seeing there, we call it the box of deception. It's a box that often you feel like you're busy, and so you feel like your time is going. But actually, it's because it's not important, but it's urgent. If you receive a call and somebody tells you, please come, I need to see you urgently. Sometimes you will go not knowing what they're calling you about. Then they say, oh, I just wanted to have coffee with you. We call that a box of deception because it occupies your time, but does not necessarily mean that you're doing something very important. Of course, the worst box, Michael, is what we call the box of waste. In the box of waste, you're spending your time on things that are not important and not urgent. And often people argue about this, but for example, maybe you spend so much time on social media or, just following the latest gossip information. And before you know it, sometimes you spend 2 hours, 3 hours just trying to check what's the latest on these celebrities that we have. People are arguing about the size of the TV. Like I was seeing, for example, when you scroll through the news headlines, Willie Paul posted a video. People are more interested on the size of the TV that is in his room. How helpful is that in your life? Now, the message I want to put across here is that every time you spend time on a particular box, one other box tends to suffer. So if you're finding yourself having to handle too many crises in your life, it also means that you're not spending enough time on the box of things that are important and not urgent, like relationships, for example, like investments, like planning for the future. We used to say making hay while the sun shines, preparing for a crisis. Maybe doing a health check if that kind of things. You take sort of a preventative measure. Making sure you're eating well, so you're preventing obesity. You're preventing becoming overweight and increasing your chances. Of course, you understand because that's what you also do to your patients. That's what we call the box of discipline. When you don't work on that box, that's why you find yourself running helter-skelter on the box of necessity, rushing so that you can be able to get intervention, being literally driven in an ambulance because of a crisis. And I think that is really to answer your question in terms of what should we focus on? How do we determine what is a priority? I would say it boils down to that particular big box, Michael, the box of discipline, where things are important but not urgent. If you spend more time there, you're more likely to be successful.
Thank you. Still on the same,
Yes.
I'll take you back to setting goals in life. because we are sort of required to kind of design your life where you need to go, and there are several key steps you need to make uh, as you design the life you need. So in terms of setting goals and staying disciplined to these goals that you set, like creating a vision for yourself, and those the small milestones that you need to undertake so that your vision is is realized. So in terms of goal setting, what would you advise us on that?
Uh, Actually, what I would say, Michael, is that your vision is only actionable if you say it aloud. And the reason I'm quoting that is that you remember the second habit I was talking about, begin with the end in mind. Most people, they have an idea what they want to do. They have an idea about the things that they think they want to be able to achieve. When you ask them, so can you share with me this plan that you have? Can you share with me this goal that you have? They don't have it written anywhere. It's just in their head. Somewhere in their head, they know what they want to do. One of the things I've done as a habit, I think for the last, I can't remember how many years, today, if you walked into my bathroom, on my wall, I always have about 5 or 6 goals that I write to myself at the beginning of every year. And I say, what do I want to achieve this year when it comes to my family, to my finances, to my um, spirituality, to my health, to education. Because the moment you affirm something that you want to do and you repeatedly see it, you're more likely to put in place what we like to call concrete actions, Michael. So what often I think is the missing piece, number one, is that people don't actually write it down. Number two, they don't even have concrete actions to try and achieve that goal. So what's the point of having a vision that's in your head? And then when you ask, what specifically are you doing to be able to execute or to achieve that particular vision? They say, well, I'm waiting for things to get right. Often we say that as you wait for things to get right, time goes. In fact, nowadays we say, as you wait for things to get right, of course, coronavirus happens, COVID-19. And it's one of the disruptive things that we have in life. Maybe it's a bit big this year, but I always say you will always have every obstacle on your way, no matter what you do.
Thank you. I think our time is quite spent, but before we take questions from the participants, because I see there are several already trickling in, one final question for me. They say men, we rarely talk about our feelings, and we only share the nice ones, but when it comes to our disappointments or things that are weighing us down, we rather spend it on we take alcohol, and so that it goes away. So my question on that would be, how should we handle such things as men, issues that are weighing us down? How should we talk about them? Should we have sort of a circle of friends or people you trust that you share things that are weighing you or are pulling you down? You share with them, or how should we share such things?
Well, I think what again, these are my thoughts, Michael. I'm not an expert when it comes to that, but I would say, let me say what you should not do. I think number one, as a young man, if you are struggling with something, I wouldn't advise that you go ahead and post it on social media. It's one of the mistakes that people do it nowadays. It definitely will not help. We've also learned that people misinterpret these so-called followers on social media to be friends that are interested in your life. We now know that often they want to know what's going wrong, and that's what makes them more excited. So I wouldn't say don't post it on social media. I think it's certainly don't sit with something that is troubling you. I think being able to identify somebody who can be able to share and talk to is important. And often, sometimes it might not necessarily be your closest friends, although it would be idea if you have the kind of friends that you can be able to trust. But again, as men, as I said, we tend to have 3 types of friends. We have friends that we drink with. It doesn't mean that necessarily you're sharing a vision with them. I think there are people that you can see your sort of paths in terms of goals, objectives, and principles in life are aligned. You know, that's a different kind of friends that you have. And there are people that probably, as you've said, based on your experience, are willing to give you an objective feedback on what you're going through. Often, our struggles is related to, you know, as you put it, Michael, it could be maybe career, for example. Maybe you've been struggling to get a job, you're frustrated, and there are people that maybe they have a young family, they don't know what to do to put bread on the table. So that's a different kind of, maybe, for lack of a better word, feedback you want to get. You want somebody who can listen, but also help you to see maybe, are there any particular mistakes that you may be making when it comes to your job hunting? Is there something that is not giving you that opportunity, right? What do you need to do? And of course, I think it would really depend on what it is that is weighing you down. And certainly, Michael, it is important not to sit with something, especially because I think nowadays we go through so much and it may end up having a far much more negative consequence on your life. All of us at one point or another go through depression. You know, you will not be the first person or the first man to go through depression, and you will not be the last man to go through depression. What you don't want is to take the wrong route of trying to address. You go through social media or you choose your drinking buddies so that they tell you, okay, let's go and have a drink. Because when you wake up in the morning, the same problem will just be staring at you, maybe even bigger, you know. Yeah, I mean, I've always believed that a perspective of life is extremely important. And it starts with what is your outlook? You know, how do you perceive it? And so the aspect of growth mindset versus fixed mindset becomes important.
Wow. Thank you for that. So I think we'll quickly go to, because I see several questions trickling in. So I think let's do them justice. So there was a question sent earlier from where we started, and while we were talking about careers. So there was a question that it goes, what are some of the requisite skills in the current job market? Like what are these soft skills that we should have, or what are some of these skills that we should be working on? And a follow up to that, somebody also asked, how do we define this skill set?
Well, that's a very good question. Again, as I was telling you, Michael, I think maybe in future we can really have a talk that we sort of drill down on this, because it's a very important discussion. People really misunderstand when we talk about job hunting and what exactly, as I said, currently employers look for nowadays. You know, that's extremely important. So when it comes to career, I don't know what the word I want to use. I want to show something. Hopefully, I can be able to just. I want to share just to answer that question, Michael. You can go to the next question. I'll just share one slide to answer that, because I think that will be better for me to be able to show it in terms of the career skills that people look out for.
Okay. So the next question, Derek is asking, how do you tell young hardworking men that are too flexible in what they can do, and they end up doing a lot of things that are not adding up to anything concrete?
So what I'm going to do, because I think those two questions would be related. Let me share a slide that we normally use when we training to define what is a skill set. We'll just take a second. Let me see that. Let me know when you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, so we normally use this in the training method to talk about what is a kind of skill set that people tend to have. And it's called Sydney's Find Three Kinds of Skills. There are three types, what we call functional, transferable. And I'd like to say when you look about it, also a lot of employers tend to really look at this. And then we have special knowledges, and then we have self-management skills or traits. And functional or transferable skills is what we say, what you can do and love to do. You know, for example, you have that, statistics or data. In terms of the verbs that we tend to use with this one, it's constructing, creating, researching, painting, analyzing, supervising, teaching, illustrating. But if you look at the special knowledges, and people tend to sometimes confuse this, it's what you know. For example, if you say I'm a pharmacist, that's a special knowledge. I'm a pharmacist by training, or I'm a biochemist by training, or I'm a physicist by training. I am a bookkeeper, I'm an accountant. We call that a special knowledge. It's what you did in school, right, Michael?
Yes,
Now,
yes.
that's different from what we call transferable skills, because transferable skills mean you say, by the way, I'm very good with numbers. I can be able to use data to interpret and even come up with some conclusions. That's a transferable skill. That's attractive for an employer. We also have what we call self-management skills or traits, and it's really how you conduct yourself. And it's funny because sometimes when you interview people, Michael, they come to us and they tell us about this self-management skills. That's the only thing they talk about. They say, oh, you know me, I'm very disciplined. I'm very flexible. I'm innovative. I wake up very early in the morning. I'm very supportive. I'm persistent. If you give me something to do, I don't give up until it's the end. Now, if it was an interview, think about it. You've given me one aspect about a self-management trait that you have, but you've not told me what is the transferable skill that makes you unique.
Wow.
I hope that answers, right?
Yes, yes, it does.
As I said, that's a whole different discussion, but I thought it would be easier to illustrate.
Yeah, clearly we need to have a whole session just on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to another question. Samuel says women currently are quite empowered, and it's like we as men currently, we don't know how to handle these empowered women. So what's your take? How should we handle the
I would
women
say
of
run
today?
away. I would say run away. Yeah, I'm joking. That's on a light note. But I think it depends on the definition of empowerment, Michael, because also in any relationship, you have to have some mutual understanding. I know I always go back to the 7 habits, but habit number 6 says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And the key word there is seek first to understand. Whether they are empowered or not, they have to be, it has to be the kind of person who is willing to sit down and want to see your perspective. The beauty about that kind of mindset, I like to call it a growth mindset, is that everybody is not just interested in their own perspective. You don't just use your own lens. You also ask yourself, can I also put the lens of the other person? So that's as far as being able to identify how amicable can I sit with this person when it comes to, that empowerment. If that is tilted, it will be very difficult to be able to coexist. Um, is it possible as men to also, I don't use the word empowered, but let's say to be assertive? Yes. I think over time we've seen also a lot of young men that lose their assertiveness because they feel like if the woman in this particular incidence of the relationship is more assertive than the man, of course it's very easy for the men to, let me not say chicken, or put the tail in between their legs, but to sort of to make it easy to coexist, they go for what we call a win-lose, where the woman is winning but the man is losing and drinking himself to be able to feel comfortable. That doesn't definitely bring a very balanced relationship. And what happens, Michael, is that it goes back to what you were saying earlier. As a man, if you're in a relationship where you're actually sort of, for lack of a better word, literally squeezed, and you don't have any oxygen, it's only a matter of time, right? And you see what normally happens in these cases. I mean, at one point in time, something will give in. It will be the depression, it will be I don't know, the drinking. So it's really important to be able to address that at an early stage. And I don't think it's always mandatory that you have to survive in a relationship where you're already feeling like you're not only less empowered, for lack of a better word, but it's not balanced. It's about your life also. So it's extremely important.
Well, thank you. So seek first to understand.
Yes.
Yes, keywords. So uh, on the charts, I don't see any questions, but if somebody would like to voice out their questions, you could just raise your hand and we'll pick you. As we wait for somebody to raise up their hand, a quick one,
Yes.
Newton. Let's touch on men and money. Let's talk money a little bit. As a young man, you're starting out, and money obviously it's a key player in life. So anything you would advise us on that line in terms of making your savings or investing in one thing or two, so that financially we are sorted.
Yeah, and again, I like that question, Michael. I think I'd first want to tie it with the fact that before you think about money, I think it's important to think about your passion and what you want to do. Most people ask, I want my first job to be giving me a six-figure salary. It's very difficult, and it's almost like a rare occurrence, as rare as snow in Kenya. I don't know if that's a good example to use. But rather than thinking of when can I get my first six-figure salary, ask yourself, when can I have my passion? Because often when you start with the passion, everything else will fall in place. And for me, that's a real life example. I never shy to say that my first job, and I was telling you, Michael, when I started dispensing in a pharmacy that was at that time it was an Insurance Plaza. My first salary was actually just about $100, right? And you're in Nairobi. But I never even thought twice to say, hey, wait a minute, am I going to survive on this? I really, really was passionate about the job that I was doing. But I think when you start with that, you're more likely to not only grow, but as you grow, you'll find that these other aspects of finances will also grow. And I think as it then grows, of course, it's important that you make the right choices when it comes to investment. And my rule of the thumb, Michael, always, and I think this is finance experts tell us, always when you get paid, pay yourself first. Now, people don't remember that. When you get paid, pay yourself first. A lot of the young men nowadays, when they get paid, the first thing they think is that this weekend, ni kuchafua.
Mhm.
It's things like YOLO, so, and unfortunately, if you think about it now, Michael, and where we are with the COVID-19, think about the people that were living the YOLO principle. Today people are surviving on their savings, they're surviving on their investments, and that's what it is in terms of preparing or planning for the future, because you never really quite know what's going to happen. So you must never, ever, ever, ever spend more than what the salary that you pay yourself is allowed to. And I think those are discussions, again, as I said, I'm sure you can get financial experts to be able to share more on that, but that's a very important principle. Saving is not something
Well,
that you have a choice to do. You really have to save.
wow. I think we'll have a whole session on money and talk about various ways on how to save and various investment options that we have. And I think we'll have a proper session on that. A very interesting question here. And I've seen this question in several forums, and I'm throwing it to you. So, what keeps you up at night?
I know. So a lot of people tend to have this very common answer that it's poverty that keeps me up at night, right? But I
Yeah.
think for me, Michael, it's a fact that if I'm going to make a change, if I'm going to leave a legacy, this is the only time I have, right? I do have two things. Maybe I'll ask David later to share for the attendees today. One is I have a podcast that I run on SoundCloud, and for me, you'll always see that my podcasts will be at weird times, like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. Because I would wake up and I'd be thinking, this is something so brilliant. Can I read about it? And I want to share, especially with the people that listen to my podcasts. And secondly, I also have a book club that we started in 2016. What keeps me awake at night is the fact that I don't want to become just another statistic when I exit, Michael, because all of us are going to live. We don't know at what time you're going to live, but what is it that you're going to be remembered for? And it also means that how valuable is today for you, that you make sure you are not only enjoying today, but especially for those of us, for example, with the family, that you're really giving the very best that you can. That's what keeps me awake, that I want to make sure that every single day I can look back and say, did I fulfill my objective for that day? You know, did I enjoy the day as it is? Am I happy with the day? Did I learn from the mistakes I made? Those are the things that, you know, keep me awake at night.
Wow, wow. Something to think on. It's quite interesting on the podcast and the book clubs. On the podcast, as I initially mentioned, some of us are religious followers. So, and I like our participants here today. We'll check it out. We'll share the link and everything so that we are all able to access it. And I think we don't have any other questions. We already
I'm sorry.
a few.
I know you can't see the book, but because it's, I don't know whether you read when it comes to there, but the book we are reading now in the book club is called Find Your Why. There's a book we did called Start with Why by an author known as Simon Sinek. So I would ask the participants, because most guys are digital, you can go to TEDx and look for Simon Sinek and listen to his talk on Start with Why. It's a very powerful talk, and there's a book also on the same Start with Why.
Okay, just before we exit that part. So now is the book club exclusively for some members or anybody can join?
No. Anybody can join. I'll actually add you. I don't have your number, but I'll add David so that he can be able to add anybody else who is interested in joining the book club.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we are already past 8. So a few minutes past our intended finish time. So if there are no any other questions, I think there's just one here. How can young men stay focused when they earn more in improving their future livelihoods? So I think basically this is when I'm earning too much, when I have something good in the bank, how am I able to stay focused? Because obviously that will give me some distractions.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Michael, because there's always this temptation to chop money. And, you know, unfortunately for your generation, I'm saying that not that I'm too old, but for us, even things like Instagram, Facebook just came the other day, you know, TikTok and everything else. So there's this perception that when you see people enjoying life, and there's a very strong temptation to also flow with the current. One thing that I think I've seen for me from a first-hand experience, first as somebody who is in the medical world, and also as somebody who's been in the business world, is that you never know what tomorrow will bring. You never know what tomorrow would bring. And then that's one thing that scares me, Michael. Even before COVID came, I always used to ask myself that in the event that you find yourself in a hole, how are you going to be able to get out? So if you're lucky and fortunate to have a good salary and earning good money, let that thought that you never know about tomorrow scare you enough to be able to really plan for it. You know, and I think you want to look back later and say, even if nothing bad happened, but at least I had planned about it, I am still better off. But of course, I also say I think it's just a discipline of knowing that I don't necessarily have to drive, I don't have to drive, I don't know, a Mercedes E-Class. I'm sure you've seen this week some talk from some of our celebrities, in quotes, how the first car they wanted to buy was a Mercedes Benz. I had a boss, like I was telling in one of the companies I worked for, and he was the GM for Africa. I used to report to him. And every time I would arrive in Dubai for a business meeting, he would pick me in a Vitz, Michael. And that's what he would go with, you know. I mean, it was so funny because I would ask him, I mean, you're a whole GM, you're entitled to a Prado or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
so I think of what perspective. And he was probably more at peace than people who are more keen on how the world perceives them, you know, or how you ride, how your car looks like. In the end, a lot of these things actually, as you've seen, don't really matter as much as the happiness that you have.
Wow. Wow. Hello, can you hear me? I'm having
Yes.
some, uh, I was having some internet issues. So Lillian has her hands raised. So Lillian, could you voice your question?
Okay, thank you, Mike. So my question is, like, right now I'm going through the job search process. How do you stay focused, maybe in your ultimate passion, uh, while trying to still build skill sets that make you employable right now? Maybe I'll get there in a few years' time, but how do, for example, pick the right skills that will get me there eventually? I don't know if you get my question.
Uh, yes. You know what? I'll also do, Lillian. Again, as I said, maybe we'll try and plan with David and Michael to really look at this topic. I'll share a screen to just share one more slide. Hopefully, that will also help you to just see where the biggest challenge is when it comes to people's understanding, right? We tend to encourage people, Lillian, that you also have to do what is called a self inventory. And that means you need to understand what is it about myself that would be attractive to an employer. And as I said earlier, if you ask me today, people are much more keen on transferable skills. There are things that you're actually good in. And some people, it's maybe IT, they're good with numbers. They have a good they're good in building relationships, for example, because those are things that can really quickly get you to rise in an organization. So I'm cognizant that it's like I'm teaching you the tail end of the training, but I want you to understand that the skill set is important. I totally agree. And you can see here, we talk about your favorite transferable skills. The goal is to discover what your favorite functional skills are that can also be transferred to any field of interest. So, I mean, look beyond, of course, the sort of degree that you have or whatever you studied on. And as I said, examples include things like I'm good at innovation. And, you know, if people nowadays, when you walk into an interview, even people go with their profile and they say, okay, here is my website. You can see how good I am in building websites. Or here is, for example, this online digital book that I actually developed. This is a paper that I wrote, you know, because people can actually see literally what you're good in and they can look at the work that you have produced. You know, we used to do this mainly with people that were like, you know, especially photographers before, because they need to come in with their work and share. But nowadays, that's what people want to see. I'm a good coach. I negotiate, I communicate well, I create, I develop, or I solve problems. And you have examples to be able to demonstrate that. In some cases, we also look at, for example, do you have leadership skills? So when you combine that with what you have, it makes you attractive. Okay. As I said, the most common mistakes people do when they are doing their self-inventory or selling themselves is saying things like, I'm adaptable, I'm charismatic, I'm reliable, I'm dynamic. Because anybody can say that. Anybody. And it's very difficult, actually. If you think about it, Michael, how do you measure reliability? You know, what do you have as a yardstick? It's like the passion, isn't it? That we
Yeah.
used to use by politicians. So when someone says I'm very dynamic or I wake up very early, it's difficult, especially at the stage where you're selling yourself, to be able to convince somebody. In fact, the key word here is that yes, they're important, but they are not transferable. If I hire you today and you're adaptable, how will that help my team? If I hire you and you're a team player, for example, it means you're more likely to help my team in delivery. But hopefully that at least gives you an idea, Lillian.
Hey, Lillian, I hope you answered, and quite interesting take on that. So I don't think we have any more questions. So, Newton, I'll just ask you to give us your parting shot.
I give my parting shot, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. And I mean, thank you so much, everybody. I know that this, I think this kind of discussion can really be endless, but it's important to start with, or rather to start it. And I'd like to encourage the people that we have today here that it's not always that I think you have to be born with a silver spoon. People tend to say, oh, I hope it's not like this motivational speakers that you come and say, oh, hallelujah, you know, like I started my butchery with a picture of a cow. I also don't necessarily subscribe to that. But one thing I can say, Michael, is that whatever you put your mind onto is really achievable. And you know, you would rather, I mean, you would rather know that you wake up every day in the morning with clarity of focus, you know your goal, and that you work towards achieving it. It may not come today, it may not come tomorrow, and sometimes it takes a very long while before you actually see, for example, results. But I think it's that determination that is going to see you through. And have I seen it? Yes. You know, for me, it's something I've evidenced in my own personal life. And I would really encourage the people today that don't just look at the opportunities and say, I don't think there's a job opportunity for me. As I said, we can always have that discussion. What is more important is what you're capable of doing, and that's going to sell you more. Out there. So yes, Michael, I think my parting shot is, I think it's possible. I think we're in a very difficult time because of COVID-19. There's a podcast I shared sometimes back, which, you know, it's something that people can also look at, that do not lose the opportunity in a crisis. We need to ask ourselves, what is the opportunity in this crisis that I can be able to learn? And I hope that today amongst our audience, we can look at that and be able to learn. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Newton, for such a great talk. And just you finished on a good note. We need to have that clarity of focus. We need to be determined, and we need to keep identifying opportunities around us so that we are able to take advantage of them. And that is what will put us ahead of the game. So thank you so much, Newton. It's been quite an interesting talk. I think it's time that has cut us short, and we could go on and on and on, but I think we'll have you for many more sessions, and my comment box has a lot of requests to have you again, I think so. So especially for the skills part, the skills bit for the job market, I think we'll have a special session on that. And I think with these talks, we'll now have to break them down into several sessions. Somebody has just thrown in a quick question. So I think let's take that, then we finish. He says career is associated with divorce. What is your take?
It goes back to you remember the box that we talked about, Michael. The only
Yes.
time career is associated with divorce is when you're focusing on the wrong box, right? Because if you focus on box number 2, the box of discipline, you'd also realize that your relationship is just as important as the work that you do. So you know, things which matter the most, I know I said that, must never be at the mercy of things which matter the least.
That's
what I remember. That's
okay.
my parting shot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Newton. It's been such a pleasure, and we are so grateful for the insights you've shared. And I know we'll have you for several sessions so that we keep learning from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and have a lovely evening, everybody.
Okay, for our participants, so thank you for attending. I hope we've all learned something. We've all taken good notes home. So we've shared Newton's podcast on the chat, so please check it out and join the religion, so to say. So
Thanks, Mike.
okay, thank you so much, guys.
Okay.